Hey, David, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Excited to connect with our audience today for another episode of State of Cybercrime. Today, we're going to talk about Russia's cyber aggression and the 1 billion person breach that happened in China, along with a few other things, I think, right, David?
Yeah, we got a lot of great stuff to talk through.
So we're going to cover a lot of our usual segments today. As always, we'll start with, is there any good news? We'll head down into the danger zone and talk about some things that should be top of mind for a lot of our audience members. We'll mention a few vulnerabilities, including a repeat offender, I think. Then we have a couple of asks for you guys. And for those of you that stick around until the very end, we do have a gift card to give away during our Viewer Appreciation Award segment. So let's crack right into it. Awesome. For those of you that are joining for the first time today, we always like to start out by covering some good news. Oftentimes, cybersecurity is all doom and gloom, but the good guys do get some good stuff done every once in a while. And today, we actually have something pretty exciting to talk about. So Sebastian Vachon Desjardins, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Well said.
David. Yeah, he was a mastermind, somewhat of a kingpin in the NetWalker ransomware group, and an ex-Canadian government employee. It was linked to something like 91 different ransomware attacks.
Yeah, he was responsible for 1,864 of the 5,058 Bitcoins that NetWalker extorted, apparently. So really, I think Kingpin, at least MVP, right, in terms of these. And it looks like it wasn't just NetWalker, but he was linked to some other RAS groups as well.
And I go
very
ahead,
good what he did. No, very good.
And he had about 700,000 in cash.
Yeah, 700,000 Canadian, and spread between two safety deposit boxes and his house. So he was definitely ready to go there. Pretty crazy, but
yeah. And talk about pretty. You mentioned something that you read in the court decision that you thought was like unexpected. What was that?
Well, it was interesting that they commented not only on how he convinced NetWalker to use mixers, like crypto mixers, and we're going to talk about one of those later, but that they actually came out and said he was good looking, presentable, and instantly likable. So just sort of odd thing to see in a court ruling.
Yeah, and maybe that had something to do with what I might consider to be a light prison sentence, 6 years and 8 months. And I'm curious what our audience thinks as well. You know that we love to connect with you in the chat all throughout our episodes of State of Cybercrime. So really curious what you think. Does the crime fit the time? Does the time fit the crime? 6 years, 8 months, 91 ransomware attacks. Really curious to see what your thoughts are in the chat.
Yeah, I like that up. It's really interesting. I don't know whether it's white collar or not, but it must be, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think our audience, I knew I liked you guys from the beginning. A lot of people think this is pretty short. I saw one person commented in that they're hoping for at least a minimum of 10 years. Another audience member, and I don't know if you know this, David, they're wondering what color Lambo that Sebastian had, or maybe he was a Ferrari guy. Yeah, and again, this was a Canadian citizen and a former Canadian government employee.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of car he drove in the real world or in the NFT world.
Yeah, maybe he had a really nice Lambo in the NFT world. So in our next segment, the danger zone, we're going to talk about some things that might be posing a risk to your organization and really organizations all around the globe. And really in the title, we wanted to call it out. There has been activity from nation state actors from Russia, particularly this group behind the Killnet, and it believes to be linked to the sanctions. Now, when I was reading about this one, David, I learned about this concept of an exclave, or this territory or region of a nation that is completely bordered by other regions, other nations, and other territories. And so this first attack, with this response to the sanctions from Russia, has to deal with something related to a Russian exclave called Kaliningrad. Can you tell our audience more about that?
Yeah, in response to the sanctions, against Russia, Vilnius, a city in Lithuania, decided, right around where the train stopped there in the animation, decided to block sanctioned goods from going from Russia to Kaliningrad. And the sanctions were coal, metals, construction materials, and advanced technology. And Kaliningrad is the home to the Russian Baltic Fleet, where the nuclear missiles are deployed. So, kind of makes sense there. Maybe that's what some of that advanced tech was. But anyway, this looks like it was a response to them stopping the train. And now I think they're going to have to take a boat from Kaliningrad to Russia and back and forth in order to get this stuff through.
And I know, like some new audience members that we likely have, we probably have some veterans that might have showed up when we first started talking about the conflict that exists in Ukraine and the expected heightened amount of cyber activity originating from Russia. For those of you that didn't catch that episode, I'll ask my marketing colleagues to just drop a link in the chat. Again, you guys can always check out previous episodes and even some highlight clips on our YouTube channel or our website. Now, this wasn't the only, kind of looks like a killnet, acted like a killnet style cyber attack. Well, there was also a similar denial of service attack that hit Norway. Now, you were drawing some correlations between this and really the attack on Lithuania. David, can you tell our audience more about this?
Yeah, so there's a passage through Norway that goes from Russia to a coal mining settlement in the Arctic. And so some similar attacks, websites down, looks like it was in response to these sanctions as well. Killnet didn't come out and claim responsibility for this, I don't think, but it certainly has all the same traits, and it's looks pretty similar.
And the takeaway here really is that, denial of service, not quite like a ransomware attack, which we often talk about, but it really is to kind of stop, to prevent you from being able to deliver goods and services, whether you're a government entity or you're, maybe in the ICS space. And Russia's definitely running, offensive campaigns in response to sanctions that are imposed against them. So, this concept of an exclave wasn't something that I was familiar with before, researching and preparing this presentation. So I'm wondering if anyone knows which of the following locations is also considered an exclave. And an exclave is a little different from an enclave, from those of you who are wondering. So is it the Vatican, Kentucky Bend, or Eswatini? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, I also thought it was really interesting. Kentucky Bend is also known as Bubble Land. Is that right?
Bubble Land. That's right. Yeah, and has a population of 9 people according to the 2020 census.
It's the place to be. But I think Monaco is an enclave. Right?
No, I thought I looked that up, and maybe if there's like a third word that we haven't learned yet, that is what Monaco is classified as.
Oh, but maybe
we'll have to go back and look that one up. Let's see what our audience says, though.
I just think it's neat, a country within a country, or an exclave. Yeah.
So most people think it's the Vatican. Everyone, when we gave you a little bit of a teaser there, it is Kentucky Bend. If you look up Kentucky Bend, or maybe our marketing host, and I know I didn't prep you for this, could find the Wikipedia article for the Kentucky Bend and drop it in the chat. But that is also considered an exclave, or a territory or region completely surrounded and not connected to, its original territory or region.
I'll take geography for 200, man.
So, kind of shifting gears a little bit and talking about a well-publicized but kind of underreported crypto theft by what appears to have been the Lazarus Group. So, if you guys remember on a previous episode, we talked about them, going after and stealing large amounts of cryptocurrency. And this one happened on what we would call a crypto bridge. Particularly the Horizon Bridge, which does resemble a similar attack by the Lazarus Group on what was the Ronin Bridge. And I think this one amounted to about $100 million in crypto. Now, David, I know some of our audience members might be crypto fanatics, trading their Bitcoin, their Ethereum, their Litecoin, and all their favorite altcoins. But for those of you that haven't heard of a crypto bridge before, do you think you could kind of educate everyone on that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess, when you're exchanging crypto without a bridge, you would need to go through like actual money or some other kind of medium. So a crypto bridge, otherwise known as a cross-chain bridge or a blockchain bridge, is good to exchange not just the currency or the Bitcoin and the Ethereum, et cetera, but also NFTs and decentralized applications. I don't know whether there's anything to exchange with decentralized autonomous organizations, but lots of cool technologies. And I guess there's a lot of need to go from one bridge or one blockchain to another. And these apparently can be exploited. One thing you didn't mention on that previous attack on the Ronin bridge, that was actually over 600 million. So these are big money. The other thing I think that was interesting is how they're laundering. I mentioned those kind of recyclers or the mixers,
like
right?
bit mixer, and for those of you that are kind of unfamiliar with blockchain, you have an address for a wallet that holds a particular amount of cryptocurrency, and when you send a transaction to someone else, that transaction gets mined and processed like a transaction, just kind of like exchanging money, and that cryptocurrency gets sent either in whole or in pieces from one wallet to another, and that is somewhat traceable. People have figured out how to reverse engineer standard cryptocurrency transactions, and so now people are going through it and essentially laundering these coins using something like a bit mixer or a crypto tumbler, and one of those was called Tornado Cash, right?
Yeah, this is what they used. And so I guess this is what they're using to launder the extorted or the illegally obtained. They didn't extort this one. They just kind of hacked the bridge, I guess. And that's how they basically, looks like you spit the crypto in, and with enough people spitting crypto in to Tornado Cash and then enough people taking it out, if you wait long enough, I guess it's a little harder to put the pieces together, but people, looks like they've figured out how to even put the pieces together here. Is that right?
Yeah, and I guess if you think about it, it's kind of like when we think of cracking passwords, or if an algorithm that made it, theoretically an algorithm could defeat it. There's only so much randomness that you can introduce into modern computing. So, but let's shift gears, right? Our headlines were about this increased cyber activity from Russia appears to be in response to the sanctions, but we also talked about this 1 billion person data breach. And for those of you out there that might be interested in buying some personally identifiable information at a low price of just, I think, what is it, about a 20 Bitcoin or 10 Bitcoin, $200,000 USD, today is your day. This PII associated with this Shanghai Police National Database is available for sale in whole, and has even been validated by news outlets like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. So what exactly happened here, though, David? There was a police database, and it was exposed, but was the database exposed, or was some front end search engine exposed? Can you talk more about that?
It's pretty crazy, it's sort of a database, a security admin or an admin relying on the firewall as the security mechanism. It's the police database or the database in the Shanghai Police Department with all this critical information was not password protected. It looks like somebody opened a port on the firewall to get to the database for maintenance and never shut it down. And so, go figure. I think the researchers first discovered this database open in April of 2021. It was open for a few months, and I guess somebody else discovered it, maybe China Dan, who did the post in the previous slide. Then they encrypted it and then held it for ransom. I'm not sure whether they paid them ransom or not. One of the interesting things is there's so much personal information in the police database, and it's not really being talked about in China very much. But the New York Times and a couple of news outlets called some of the victims. They were able to get the phone numbers of the victims and call them and ask them how they felt.
Yeah, I remember one of those people that they had validated bought some moldy cigarettes and filed a police report against it, and then all that got posted online. I think it was to the tune of like $400 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean it's like think about all the details in all of those databases, and they're collecting an awful lot, and to be able to validate that it was all accurate, and then validate that China's not really talking
Taking
about it.
identification information and police reports, even investigative reports, and remember, all this is available to you for the low price of 2 cents per record.
Yeah, I mean it's just crazy. 23 terabytes of data, and when something like this happens at the police, who investigates? It's kind of a conundrum there. Who's responsible for this?
And David, I don't know if you were able to confirm the source of this photograph or not before today's webinar, but you had mentioned getting a picture of the new digs for this admin.
Apparently not much has changed. Just looks a little different from their office. The offending admin that forgot to close this hole on the firewall.
So, in another, breach that I think is a little bit more relatable to a lot of our audience, there was an airport that had a publicly exposed S3 bucket. So for those of you that are kind of going through a cloud transformation, Amazon S3 is one of the most popular, if not the most popular object storage that exists, meaning, you can store application information, you could store log files, really any kind of data object in an S3 bucket, but it's really easy to take that bucket and make it publicly available. And so there might be a lot of valid reasons why you might do it. The application it serves might need to face the public, but oftentimes what happens is private data ends up being exposed, and that's what happened here. And this included airport employee information. This included, I think, passenger name records, as well as things like pictures and ID cards. I think you had a little bit more on this one too, right, David?
Yeah, I mean, this is the national ID cards, as well as information about the planes, how they get fuel, the fuel lines, coordinates, and things like that. It was actually data affecting 4 airports, Colombia, Peru, and so I think it's really important data to keep secure, because terrorist groups or bad actors could definitely learn what we wouldn't want them necessarily to learn, or be able to impersonate employees with those ID cards, things like that.
And I might be hinting at one of our humble asks, but this is definitely one of the kind of basics of cloud security, to make sure you can know which data should be public and which data should be private. And definitely it's going to be a part of our ask to make sure that you can do that. So, let's talk, though, in our final segment here, about vulnerabilities, at least before we give away our viewer appreciation awards and answer a couple of questions that have come in the chat. Proxy logon. It's still here. We have talked about proxy. I think this is the 4th time that we've talked about proxy logon and threat actors, using proxy logon to get an initial foothold. For those of you unfamiliar, that's SSRF vulnerability that existed inside of Exchange, and attackers are this time it's Chinese threat actors using the ShadowPad malware to drop Cobalt strike beacons to infiltrate building automation systems. Am I getting that right, David?
Well, that's one of the first steps that they're doing, is infiltrating these, and it's unusual for a threat actor to target these. And the hypothesis is that they're kind of testing the waters and seeing what other information they could gather to potentially exfiltrate, or do more damage or get more data. A lot of the targets, I think, are ICS providers, so that's a little scary as well.
And one thing that I was thinking about this was, is this like a playground? Is this a warm up? When I read about this, getting into buildings, seeing if you could move from something like a thermostat to a switch, or a thermostat to a computer or a server, or from an ICS device to an actual protected network that you might not have thought was interconnected. Is this just noise, or is this really something that people should be concerned about? And I think when we think about motivated state-sponsored threat actors and using previously zero-day vulnerabilities to drop malware and take control of building automation systems, I think there's more to come here. My prediction is that we'll talk about this again sometime.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty safe prediction. I mean, with the proxy logon we've been talking about for a while, but something else that's interesting is that ShadowPad has been around since 2015, and this is modular malware. It's a successor apparently to PlugX. which is another kind of modular malware that's been around since 2008. So when you think about this, it's sort of like, boy, some of these vulnerabilities take a long time to filter out and get fixed. They're still there.
Now, David, doh, right? This DNS over HTTPS. It seemed like it's a secure way to handle DNS, but when you implement DNS over HTTPS, or doh, as David has coined it, you're not able to monitor DNS traffic the same way anymore. Because before you could get logs from your DNS servers or some sort of DNS concentrator, and then you could do analysis on it. You could look for things like unusual reverse lookups or command and control or data exfiltration over DNS, but you can't do that anymore, right? So can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting with DNS. That's been one of the things that we can monitor. Okay, when somebody's resolving an IP address, what are they looking for? What sites? So the deny list can be built on that. We've also talked a lot about how we can use that to spot command and control, and other bad activity. But if you're going to wrap DNS traffic inside of HTTPS from the browser, the only thing that you'll see is this doh server on the internet, the one that's doing the DNS over HTTPS. So, that, hinting at our humble ask again, that is something you could look for. But if you see kind of these low volume payloads over long sessions to an IP address you haven't blocked, that could be signs that you've got a DNS over HTTPS connection. And I guess anybody can kind of load this up in their browser. It's a plugin, right? And so you're encrypting it. It seems like a good idea for privacy, but if you're trying to monitor these connections, this is
or a good idea for getting some data out via stealth method, right? We always talk about all the vectors to get data and to get data out, and this is just another one. Now, also, my marketing colleagues can probably help me out here. Varonis's Threat Labs team did a write-up on this, right?
Yeah, thanks, Frank, for putting the link in the chat there. This is a really interesting read from our research team about this way to do DNS.
Now, a really famous person at Varonis, whenever they want to really get something across and ask fellow Varonis employees to take care of something, they always say, it's a humble ask. And so we have a humble ask for you, our audience. One, if you have anything to do with ICS, or really, if you're responsible for cybersecurity at all right now, cybercrime it's high. Cyber criminals are active. They're doing things. State-sponsored cyber actors are a little bit more active than we've seen them in the past from multiple different nations, not just Russia. So don't let your guard down. If you haven't patched Exchange yet, and you didn't listen the last 5 times we told you, please patch Exchange. I'm going to say that one more time. If you haven't patched Exchange yet, and you're attending this webinar, please patch Exchange.
I want to do that with you.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Please patch Exchange. Got it. I think our whole audience is going to make sure that that's taken care of. The other thing that you'll want to do is check object stores and other cloud data stores for public exposure, right? If you have a large amount of information that's exposed to the internet and you haven't checked out to make sure there isn't any sensitive information in there, it's definitely something that you should do, as well as evaluating your risks to DNS over HTTPS, or as David has so coined it, doh. We've even got a link to a Git you can go and grab that's going to have a block list of a lot of the popular DNS over HTTPS providers, so that you can put that into, you can put a deny list or a block list together to make sure that someone can't circumvent your DNS, exfiltrate data via DNS over HTTPS. The last ask that we have for you guys is we've put together a new attack simulation. So if you're not familiar with Varonis's attack simulations, when the Varonis incident response team, our global forensics team of Varonis Threat Labs, when we see something new, or we see something that is prevalent, like many organizations are getting hit with the same style of attack, we put together a simulation inside of a lab environment so we can showcase this attack and some ways that you might be able to detect and respond to it in a lab. It's super interesting. It's super compelling. So again, I'm going to ask, Frank, I think you've already dropped it in once, but if you wouldn't mind dropping a link in again to our new attack sims This one's called the smash and grab. It is the most common attack that we see from an incident response standpoint. And really, just to keep it really simple, attackers are getting an initial foothold. They're looking around for some data. They're grabbing that data. They are exfiltrating it, and then they are encrypting it, right? So they're practicing that double extortion method, and time is of the essence. And that's definitely something that you'll see if you get to check out that attack sim. With that, then, everybody, the show isn't made possible without you, our audience. So we appreciate you. We look forward to you tuning in to our next episode of State of Cybercrime. We hope you had a great time and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.